Everything rises and falls on leadership. That's a statement that John Maxwell says all the time. He talks about that all the time. And in this hour or so, we're going to talk about how things rise and falls on leadership and how we can improve our leadership. I have a special guest you see on the right there, Mr. Mark Dunny, and we're going to talk in just a minute about his experiences with leadership, people that are rising and falling on leadership. In one of John Maxwell's books, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the first law is the law of the lid, which basically states that if you have leadership goes from a 1 to a 10, 10 being the best leader, everyone has a number. All leaders have a number. So if your number is 5, if you're a 5 leader, because you have all of your skills have led to 5, the people that you lead can't go above a 4. They can't, because you restrict them because of your leadership to go a 4. So in order for them to go higher, you need to go higher. And that's really what we're going to talk a lot about today, is this concept of raising the lid of leadership. Let me give you an example of leadership that you might have heard of. So you might have heard of Richard and Maurice, or Mac McDonald. So the McDonald brothers, back in the day when they started McDonald's, they perfected the fast food system. They called it the speedy service system. And one of the things that they did was they were really efficient. If you think about, like, Mark lives in Michigan and Detroit, and you know the assembly line process. They created a system and a process to make it very efficient, right? Make it very efficient. And that's why it was called the speedy service system. So fast food was really born or birthed from Mac, from the McDonald brothers. Now, some of the other things that they did is, their first menu, they had about 20 items on the menu, and they realized some of them weren't selling. So they only sold 9 items. The top 9 items, that's all they sold. And they sold it, everything else, they took off the menu. So again, to limit the number of items, to make it fast. So one of the thing about the McDonald brothers, they started with 1 McDonald's, and I think they got to 10. They were very, very hands-on. They were very hands-on. In every McDonald's they opened, they were very hands-on from a leadership perspective. Some would say the word micro management. Yeah, they probably were micro at the beginning. So the last thing I'll say about the McDonald brothers is they had a goal to sell the company for, to get $1 million from the company. That if they were going to sell, they were going to get $1 million. And so during the growth of McDonald's, they hired this guy named Ray Kroc. And Ray Kroc was their milkshake salesman. And so Ray wanted to take this McDonald's, nationwide and grow this and franchise it. And they did not want to. The brothers didn't want to at all. They didn't want to at all. So Ray bought the company McDonald's from the brothers. What's interesting about it, the price of what they sold it for was $2.7 million. Why that's important is Ray constructed the purchase price so each brother would walk away after taxes with $1 million. So it was kind of a limit or a governor they put on themselves, right? Or a lid, like that they put on themselves for as far as the value of McDonald's. And since then, I think there's 42,000 McDonald's in the world now. So a little bit more. By the way, if you look at the 2.7 million that they sold it for, in today's dollars, it's 27 million. So still way underpriced. way underpriced. So interesting. So one of the thing about the McDonald brothers is they were good operators. They were good managers. Were they great leaders? We can discuss that. But they had, their leadership was got to a certain level. So one of the things about the law of the lid I want to make clear is that we're not saying that you have to be a bad manager to be a 4 or 5 or 6, whatever. All we're saying is, in this we'll talk about, is how do we raise that to be an even better leader. So it's not good or bad. It's just increasing the level of effectiveness of your leadership. Now, so I've talked about the McDonald brothers. I've talked to you about the law of the lid. Now, you might be thinking, what kind of leader am I? Am I a 4? Am I a 7? You're probably not a 10. Okay, let's be clear. You're probably not a 10, but you're probably someplace in the middle. So how do you really think about that? So some of the things to think about when you're rating yourself on leadership is like, how's your vision? Do you have a vision that you cast for your team that everybody knows, everybody's driving towards? Is everybody compelled to your vision? Are you self-disciplined? Do you have great self-discipline in what you do, how you do it, and you have consistency towards the standard you have? How are your people skills? Are you effective in leading people, growing people, inspiring others, motivating your team? So think about that. Character is really important. Do you have integrity? Do you say you're going to do something and you do it? And lastly, experience. So are you learning from successes and failures? Are you learning from the things that you've done? So I would take those 5 quadrants, 5 areas, and start just think about yourself. Then give yourself a number. Then that's your baseline or starting point where you need to work on. Okay. So at this time, you see this guy on the right hand side of the screen or the other side of the screen. Let me introduce this. So this person's name is Mark Dunny, as you see. Mark Dunny and I worked together on 4 separate companies in the pharmaceutical industry. For some reason, I couldn't get rid of him. No, I'm only kidding. No, so for some reason, we always, went to the same company, worked together. We worked really well together. We'll talk about how much we worked with each other to help each other grow, help each other do a lot of things. He's got his own coaching company. It's called Mark Dunny, or ML Dunny and Associates LLC. He lives in the beautiful state of Michigan. Avid golfer, probably plays, how many, like 3 or 4 times a week now?
Yeah, let's say 4 and just smile about that.
Of those 4 times a week, how many of those days are good?
Oh, probably, well, good like leadership, right, has its own definition. So yeah. I would say every day is good because God blesses me with beautiful weather. I'm on the golf course.
There you go.
Golf-wise, maybe 3 out of 4, 2 out of 4, depending on the week.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So anyway, listen. Let's talk. Go back to about some of the leadership things. So I gave you the McDonald's example. So do you have an example in your past about somebody that needed to raise their lid on leadership?
Yeah. First of all, Rutherford, thank you and your organization, Glass Walls Leadership, for inviting me to spend some time with you this morning. It's always great to talk with you. We've had this conversation, I don't know how many times, and I don't know how many settings. So for us, this kind of comes natural. I think we have mentored each other for almost 30 years in some form.
Yep.
I appreciate that and that opportunity. I love the things that you said. I love the McDonald's story. It's one of our favorites, right? As we get a chance to share information and stories And it does highlight the difference that it can make when leaders are holding organizations back. And I think that's the first step is I have a list sitting in front of me of 8 different people, known leadership development, training development people, and their definition of leadership. And all of them are a little bit different, including John Maxwell's from one of his original books. And you and I are both kind of Maxwell apostles, if we followed him long before he reached the level he's at now. Mm-hmm. But I think that that's important to understand what leadership is. And the other thing I think is important, one of the things that we like to say is leadership doesn't just happen, it's developed. So you're not naturally born with that. You may be naturally born with certain characteristics, but it has to be continually developed. And one of the things you said is character, integrity, and leading by example. And I cannot stress enough how important it is for leadership that you are being watched and what you model is what people see. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's a very important aspect as we go through. And rating yourself as a leader is really tough because one of the, for me, is I've worked with dozens of organizations and leaders at every level from CEOs to frontline leadership, is people never accurately assess themselves of where I am, right? And those people who maybe under-assess themselves, I love working with those people because they're eager to get better. They're learners, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's one of the characteristics of developing leadership is being a learner, a continual learner. But the other side of the coin, and it's really tough for you and I when we work with people like this, are people who think they are the 10. I am a 9. I am a 9 and I'll attend a workshop, make me a 10. And I think that those are the examples that you and I will start off with to share with people just to give them an idea. And I'm guessing folks who are watching this are going to shake their head and said, I worked for somebody just like that. He or she thought they were really good at what they did. It's like golf. There's always somebody better and somebody worse. But those people who think they're really good, you have no idea as we go through. Let me give you an example, Rutherford, as we go through. Our original organization, which was a big company at the time, I was working for a person who moved into a role, a team already existed, and this person thought because they had spent a lot of time in the home office. Remember back in the days when the home office was quote unquote the home office? and this person was very convinced, he just was convinced that he knew everything. And that's not leadership. His example was very simple. His coverage area was anything west of the Mississippi, but included some of the upper Midwest states with a unique carve out. But he'd spent no time west of the Mississippi. He'd spent very little time there. But he wanted to come in and fix everything and tell you what you needed to do, right? And if you're building a culture, you're representing leadership in your team, one of the important factors is to get an understanding, to spend time asking questions and getting to know your people. There was no time for that with this individual. So if you have or are working for somebody who just is telling you what to do, that's not a leader. That's somebody who's a manager. You need to manage events, you need to manage situations, but that's not leadership. And people often confuse those things. In fact, the 3 areas that often get confused are leadership, managing, and mentoring. And those areas, I think, Rutherford, create challenges for people. But when you have people who come in and don't want to lead, they don't want to spend time to develop people, and their limitations set that you need to manage this and we need to move on, that really limits the opportunity of growth for, in this case, it would have to be 75 people in that person's organization. Imagine taking 75 people who were hired because they're very talented, very good at what they do, and you're putting the top on them and saying, this is as far as you're going to go, because the leader isn't interested in developing people. And that's probably the number one factor where leadership gets squashed, is that they won't invest in developing their people because I know everything and I'm the best. And you never hear them say, I hired this person because they're better than me.
A question for you on that. So thinking about this situation, do you remember how many people, How long did you work within the situation? 2 years, 3 years?
About 2.5 years.
In those 2.5 years, how many people do you remember that got promoted within his or her organization that you're talking about?
That's a great question. In that 2.5 year period, there were 2 people that got promoted. They were field people, moved into some ancillary role. There were 7 people that I know of just in my area that transferred out. Good people that we lost because they didn't see an opportunity to move further on. Even though we were trying to support them, they're almost a quote, Rutherford, from all of them was that I don't see any place to go in this organization, not as long as this person's leading it.
So there's a cost to this. There's a huge cost.
Exactly.
There's 2 costs. There's cost of people leaving the organization, and there's a cost of the growth of the organization, both right. From financial and people. So, this lid that this person put on the growth of the region, district, region or zone was huge. And so what's interesting about this, Mark, and you can back me up on this, is that the corporation never feels it. They don't see it, right? They don't right. sense it because it's squishy, right? It's right. not this thing they can track.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I think what we have found, and it is changing in some regard, it's better. But what we have seen a lot is the farther up the organization you go, the leadership becomes a visionary and strategically has great vision, but there may be multiple levels in between that don't filter down to the first 2 or 3 levels of an organization, right? And so up above, that's measured by a metric, which is usually a number, which may or may not accurately reflect what's actually going on from a leadership standpoint. However, let me just flip that over and say there are opportunities. I don't want people walking away saying I'm a frontline manager, a mid-manager, so I can't change that. See, that's wrong, in my opinion. You can change that. As a leader, you deal with the organization that you have, right? If you're a frontline manager and you're managing 10 people, if you're a marketing manager, an operations manager, you're managing 3 people, you still can manifest through leadership opportunities of development, opportunities of setting an objective, a plan, and you can still help guide those people. Here's the tough one, and there are going to be people shake their head at you and I when I say this, but I know you're going to agree with this. As a leader, if you lose somebody to another organization because you didn't have opportunity for them in your organization at the time, that's a win. We don't want to lose all of our good people. We need to create development, but that's still a win of development. And leadership is about strategy, it's about vision, but it's about development of your people and yourself. And that's kind of the core of what we're spending time on today.
Mark, I couldn't agree with you more. And by the way, it is, I've said this a lot about leadership. So we're both fathers, and we both have, we both have kids, and then hopefully we taught them enough from age 0 to 18. So when after they go on with their life, they've learned something.
Right.
We've had some type of impact. So that's what I feel like when somebody leaves and goes someplace else. So they're going to make impact on patients, companies, and the fact, and that's our goal.
Yep.
Our goal is to grow people as much as and there's going to be a lot. If you're a great leader, the large percentage of people will stay.
Yep.
And they'll turn down $20,000 more because of what you have built in the organization and where they see themselves. They might not turn down 40, but they'll turn down. You might tell them if they say 40, go ahead. You go ahead. Go and come back.
Yeah.
But the point is that if they leave, and if they're leaving for the right reasons, and then they're going to make another organization great because of what they've learned from the previous leader.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge win, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Yep.
So let me give you an example. So let me give you an example from my career. So I had a leader who just hired me into this organization. It was a unique organization, and they did things a lot different from, I'd been at 2 organizations before this, and how they, their vernacular was drastically different. How they did presentations, completely different. And I was there for about 2 to 3 weeks, and I had to present to the CEO and the VP of sales on something. I had no idea what I was doing, because it was so new, and it was so different. And I got a little help from another first line leader, and the manager told me I had to do it, and literally spent 0 time with me he never looked at the presentation. He never walked me through what he thinks I should change, update, growth. And obviously, because that, you kind of know what happened in the presentation. It was less than spectacular. Let's just say that. It was okay, but it wasn't the standards that you and I would say are great. I was not very happy when I walked out, because it wasn't great, right? Because I didn't get the coaching and training. And then a little bit after that, so just a few weeks after that, and now I'm there for less than a quarter, but it was the end of the quarter. So he gave me a rating for the first quarter, and you could imagine that it wasn't good either.
Right.
I was like,
Right.
Wait a minute, you're giving me a grade. I'm completely new, everything, and you haven't spent any time with me to help me grow, but you're grading me harshly. I said, after getting that for the first time in my career, I said, okay, all right. So then put my head down, worked with the team, grew it from where we were to the next quarter. We were number 1 in the nation, and so we did an evaluation. Mark, you know what he said to me? Nothing. he basically said nothing. So he didn't. The thing with this type of leader is that person is just thinking about the next level.
Mm-hmm.
They think about, how can I take these people that work for me, and how can they perform to get me to the next level? They're not interested in my growth or anybody else's growth, or growth of the organization, or patience.
Right.
That none of that is what they were, patients or customers, depending on what you're selling or doing. They're interested in getting to a different title, and we've all seen this, where their whole focus is the person above them. How do I make them believe that I'm the greatest thing in the world?
Yep.
How do I make it? And the people below me, it doesn't matter. They're just an instrument to get me there.
Sure.
And that's how all of us felt. And I'll give you one more story about this person, because he was the previous to my coming on board. He had the region that I took over, and you talk to the people, the field reps, about him. They told me when he worked with, typically a manager works for a day and a half to 2 full days with a representative in the field.
Right.
This person would meet the rep at a Starbucks, talk about the business, and then get back on the plane. So what he was doing with the reps is the same thing he was doing with the managers, the same thing. He was spending as little time as possible just to basically check the box to do this, but it wasn't growing. And because of that, he was trying to grow himself, but he was limiting the growth of the company, and his leadership never increased. Now, if you think about a level of 1 to 10, to me, he's probably like a 3 or 4 at the most as far as a leader, because of just the things we talked about. So to me, that's kind of a leader that doesn't care about growth. He's not somebody that you and I would be interested in working with in our companies now, because that's not what he's looking at. He's not looking at improving himself just to improve his title. So it's very interesting. So Mark, we just talked about a couple of situations, right, that we've been in. What do you think about some practical strategies that you know of to raise the leadership lid of leaders in organizations?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rutherford. We, I think we need folks to think about that. A leader holding the lid down has such a wide impact, right? And so, again, you and I come from a long history of a sales background for the first 30 years of our careers, basically, as we then extend it out. But strategically, the leader, again, needs to model, and he needs to model a lot of things, right? And there are key factors that can be developed. That's why you and I do this, right? We're so excited at the opportunity. It's making them aware. Let me give you a couple examples, and I'll address one or two specifics, and I know you can jump in and share some of your perspective too. But things. First of all, decision making is huge, right? How do you make decisions, and the style of what you do with decision making is a big factor. What kind of input do you get? Because people watch that and they value that. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I think continuous learning is important. Anybody that gives themselves a 10 says, I have nowhere to go, I'm perfect, right? And I don't know of anybody that's done that. And I've worked for some great leaders. You and I had shared the opportunity to work with great leaders. But you always have to be continuous learning. They encourage continuous learning of their teams. They attend seminars, and they're very public about it. Look, I'm going to spend 3 days down in Florida spending time with John Maxwell on coaching and development and those kind of things, right? You and I still attend those things. We still do those things. They offer, and they look at books. I mean, I don't know if you can see behind me here. I've got a whole stack of books here. I've got 2 in front of me. I read a lot, and I try to stay current, but I also go back to old books. I mean, here's a book that was written back in 1985, Lincoln on Leadership, right? And I recommend that to people coming through. So being a continuous leader is important. Modeling that, making sure people know that with your team is important. The other thing is that we undervalue, because we don't necessarily utilize the tool, is networking. So I'm old, so I know a lot of people, right? And you shouldn't laugh, because you're not that far behind me.
I'm a long way behind. I'm miles behind you.
But as we go through, we build relationships, and people always think relationship is like the friendship that you and I have established over the 30 years, but not always. You don't necessarily have to love somebody to keep in contact with them and work with them. And again, I've been blessed. I've met so many great people who are always people I can pick up the phone and haven't talked to in 5 years, and I can call them, and we're like we just talked yesterday kind of thing. But I think networking is very important, and it designs an opportunity for people to lay out a plan that says, in my network, I admire Rutherford for these skills. I admire person B with these skills, person C, and you get that input. Plus you have connections, right? Those connections really help in value. One of the things that's been fun for us is that I don't spend all my time in the biotech pharmaceutical area. I spent a lot of time in other industries too. I've worked with CEOs in the automotive industry, with supply chain, manufacturing, because the leadership components are the same. Doesn't matter the industry. And people have this fallacy, oh, you grew up in this industry, so you're like this. Now, there may be stereotypical characteristics of certain industries because they've been that way, but if you watch leaders emerge, there's some common characteristics, though. And let me throw the third one, and that's seeking feedback, right? And it goes with networking. it good leadership says, tell me what your opinion is, tell me what you saw in that decision, tell me what bluntly what I do wrong, what should I have done better, even if it was okay, and give me that kind of feedback, because good leadership expands their ability, like decision making, to learn how I'm going to make decisions and how we're going to do that. And I think that those are three of the areas. Other things maybe you touch on for me: coaching, delegation's a very important thing of leadership. All of those things can be developed, but one of the things I know that I've admired in you, and you've actually coached me a lot on this, is the ability to delegate and push that out. And I think it'd be of value, share some of that with the folks that are listening to this.
Yes. So listen, delegation is one of the most important things with leadership. It's difficult. It's actually, especially when you're doing it to somebody you're trying to grow, you might have to work a little harder because at the beginning with that, because because you ask them. So an example is in pharmaceuticals, they have these thing called POA, Plan of Action meetings, and they do it every quarter or twice a year, depending on the company. And then, so if you're a first line leader, you are putting together this meeting, and then if you're trying to grow somebody, you might have this person put it together for you. Now, you have to walk with them the entire time.
Yeah, right.
And you got to spend a lot of time. You're delegating them, but you're also spending more time on that than you would if you just did it by yourself. And
when you're spending time with them, Rutherford, explain what that means, because to some people, like the people we talked about a little bit earlier, I'm spending time with them because I'm telling them what to do. And that's not delegating, right? No. So there's some components with delegating that are important. So I think you should explain that a little bit more.
Yeah. So when I'm spending time, I'm coaching them. I'm coaching them on. So tell me, how's the first day going to go? Who's going to speak? Why do we have them speaking? What's the goal of this? Why would you structure it? So what are you going to get out of this? What's the team? So I'm asking them these questions so they can say, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. This runs in. So when I talk to them, I'm trying to get them to understand the entire picture of what's going to happen in this meeting or this event or this talk.
Sure.
So I want them to look at the entire picture. It's almost like a work, begin with the end in mind. Okay, come work yourself backwards.
Right.
So because sometimes we'll do things and they don't fit. They're like, why did you put this? It's cool. It looked, but it doesn't really fit with the goal, right? It doesn't fit with the goal of the meeting or this person or whatever. So in delegate, that's why it takes so much time, because you're talking with this person and you're coaching this person on really how to think about the overall theme, message, and goal of the meeting. And it could take forever. But if you do it well, the next time they'll be better. The next time, I'll give you an example. There were certain people that, to me, and I think to you, the Bible of leadership is Ken Blanchard's Situational Leadership.
Exactly. Yep.
Situational leadership is the most important book in leadership.
Yep.
As a first, because it's perfect. If you are listening to this and you haven't ever read by the way, you can finish it in just 2 cups of coffee.
Right.
I mean, it's not exhaustive.
Right.
But that will tell you what you need to know, how you need to grow. But that type of thing, being hands-on at the beginning and then hands-off. So there was people that I was hands-on like 1 or 2 meetings, and then in the 3rd meeting, I didn't even have them send me the agenda. I didn't even have them, because of what they worked. I trusted them. It's a big deal. That's a big word for us, right? Trust. So I trusted them that they were going to do a good job. And they would say, do you want to see it? I said, no, I think you're going to be good. And we'd go to the meeting, right? And they would present. Now, to be clear, I would always help in that meeting. I would give them the light, but if there was anything supportive, I would add that at the end of the meeting to help support their point if necessary. Actually, not even only if necessary. It was always necessary because it really amplified their meeting, and they felt great about it because they ran it. They did it, right?
That's excellent.
So to that, I just gave you a kind of an example. Give us an example of a leader or a leadership situation you've been through that was positive, that somebody really raised, their own lid.
Right. Yeah. There's so many. I appreciate the opportunity to share these stories, and that there's people that it's so fun to watch them grow, right? Mm-hmm. To watch them take it. But let me give you an extreme story. At one time, I have an individual working for me, and again, we are not ignoring the fact that in big organizations you have metrics that you're responsible for. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the time frame of developing somebody versus you achieving those district, regional, national goals, they don't always line up perfectly, right? Mm-hmm. And an individual working with me on my leadership team who was struggling as they came into the role as a frontline manager. Part of it is that person was young. She was young. She was very open to working with people, but she was just learning how do you hold somebody accountable and still be a supporter without them thinking, so-and-so's on my back, I'm short-lived here, all that kind of stuff that people go through. And she actually went into a I don't know what you call it, some program, we call it a PIP, I think, or something like that, performance improvement plan, that we worked out. She worked out, is probably the best way to put it. Here's what I'm going to do over the next 3 months, 6 months, a year to develop my team and to achieve the goals I need to do, including those emotional intelligence skills that so often get pushed aside because you got a number you're trying to hit. So you're spending all your time managing and not really leading people coming through. And this person went through that program, did a great job. Within a year, from a metric of sales performance, totally turned that around. But here's the other thing that I'm most proud of what that person did. 2 years later, she was Manager of the Year. She won 2 back-to-back trips. And the thing I'm most proud of is she developed 3 people, got 3 people promoted from a team at one time that was struggling. Now, when I look back, I look what she came into, how she replaced, not a lot of team development involved in that. In fact, to this day, that person's now part of my team. She become part of ML Dunny and Associates because her coaching skill became so good that she excels in coaching people. And so I invited her back. I think actually I ended up hiring that, believe this or not, 3 times I've hired that individual because she just took the ceiling away. She did it by focusing on her skills and competencies that she can improve and on building the team around her, being very clear with expectations, but supporting the team to build. There are a lot of stories I think that we could share, you and I, between the networks we've been in and programs, but I'm very proud of what this person has done and where they've come. And that wasn't me, right? Sparky Anderson, the great baseball manager, said it's never about the manager, it's always about the players. What they want to do, how they're going to do that. Well, I don't totally agree with that. I think you can coach and lead people a lot, but they have to want to do that too. And what a great success story. I'm very proud of that person, what she's done.
Mark, you understand that 90% of the crowd will know who Sparky Anderson is. They'll be like,
yeah, I do understand that.
Sparky Anderson. I've never heard that name.
Sorry.
Baseball. He's a baseball guy.
Yeah, baseball and golf, my 2 passions, right?
Yeah, baseball guy. And so question about that. So if you go back to that person as far as the things we talked about before, to like the strategies to help. What do you think of all the things? Was it continuous learning, delegation, networking? feedback or something else or a combination? What was like the towering strength that she displayed to grow as far as her lid?
Yeah, I think the two factors where she was dedicated to continue to learn, so she can continue to want to make herself better, and in doing that, she got feedback to guide where do I need to spend my time and how do I need to do that. So those two factors, what you and I categorize as continuous learning and then effective feedback, going to the right people to get feedback, not people that say, hey, you're great, don't worry about it. You're gonna no people that are going to give you very good advice. What can I do better? Here's where you're wonderful. This is what, if you go to your friends, this is what they say. Oh, you're wonderful. They just don't see you in that setting, right? If you go to a mentor, this is the difference between that coach and a mentor. If you go to a mentor, the mentor says, tell me about areas you're getting feedback on, or what are the areas nobody talks to you about? They say, you're a great communicator, you're really supportive of the team. What do they say about holding people accountable? What do they say about your strategic plan and your vision for the team? Do they say anything about that? When you get feedback like that by good mentors, gives you a guide to go for. So, but those two things, really, feedback and continuous learning, thshe just took off of that.
Yeah, so Mark, let me tell you, it's funny, you sparked a story in my mind about, because I coached basketball for 21 years or so, and I lived in a little town in Northern California, and I coached so many kids in basketball, and before high school, and then when they get on the team, and so we go to the high school team, so we go to a high school game, and one of the players who I coach would come to me after the game, and we're walking out the door on the middle of the floor with my wife and some of the players. Hey coach, how'd I do? And I would say, how do you think you did? Well, I think I did well. I said, so they would typically say something like, well, I had 10 points. I said, that is fantastic. I said, how many rebounds did you have? How many steals did you have? And my wife would go, why are you saying that? Why are you saying that, right? And I would tell this, and I would say this to her and all the leaders, is the terminology, nobody gets better if you don't tell them the truth.
Right.
Now, and it depends on how you tell them. I don't want to beat them over the head. And right. I tell my wife, I said, listen, those kids know me, that I'm going to tell them the truth. And so I'm not going to tell them they did great when they did okay. Right. And I'm going to also tell them there's things that you did good. How do you get better? How do you think? And so some of the feedback that you give, by the way, you got to know who your audience is, right? So exactly. I knew who my audience was. My wife thought I was being harsh, and I wasn't at all. And the player came back, by the way, a couple games later, and said, hey, you saw it. I got, and they went away from points into rebounds, into steals, and really impacting how the team won. And that was the thing I was trying to get, and they got it. They knew it. They knew that was important. So
but
it's
I think Rutherford, the acceptance of feedback from a team to a leader is very much based on the respect and the relationship with that leader, which is one of the areas under leadership that I think sometimes gets overlooked. And what's your relationship with the team that you're, not only the team that you're actually, in your organization, but the team above you and to your side, your colleagues, and how that feedback goes through. And it's amazing, respected leaders have the leeway to be very blunt and straightforward, but doing it in a way that's not discouraging, but encouraging. Yeah. Right. Not in the way that says, oh, they just want too much, we want more and more, but in the way of improvement. Three areas of competencies. You're very good at area A. B, you're solid at, and C is an area for work. So let's spend time. I don't want you to ignore A. I want you still to continue to grow there. But in the third area of competencies, let's talk a little bit about that too. And that's development as opposed to, the stick that says, yeah, what have you done for me lately? That kind of thing. And I think that that's important. And that takes us kind of full circle back to that leadership lid, because the leadership lid is not only reflected in the skills and competencies of a leader, it's reflected in their ability to interact with the team to open them up. So there are a lot of components to that, and all of those lead to either the growth of a team or to the team. 5th year in a row we finished 4th. Not bad, not great. Why is that, right? And a lot of that can be looked back at how the leadership is evolved or changed or not as they come through.
Yeah, you finished 5th year in a row, you finished 4. How many teams do you have? 3.
Come on.
You finished 4 out of 4 or 4 out of 50, right? It just depends.
Right.
That's interesting. So
right.
the one quick story I'll tell you about somebody that I worked with, and this has a lot to do with feedback. I was giving him year-end feedback about how he was, and I promoted him before to a second line leader, and I was talking to him about here's the stuff that you're doing really well. And he's like, yeah. What do I suck at? Where can I? And he only wanted to know how he could improve, where he could improve, and what he focused on. So if you think about that mindset, and I had to say, hey, I'm going to tell you, but you still have to accept the good, right? But I'm going to tell you, but because of that mindset, he was always learning. He'd always go to things and he would figure out leading in multiple different areas. So I talked to you just a little bit about basketball. He had a friend in basketball. He would find things that he could use because of what his friend in basketball used. He would go to alternate situations. So it just wasn't only the work that he did. Not. I tell people that all the time. When somebody's looking to lead, are you the leader of your homeowners association? How do you lead? There's so many things to lead in. It's just not leading 5 to 10 people or 75 people. There's leadership all over.
Right.
How are you getting better at leading this team? And so he was growing because of the different things he was in, and he was always inquisitive. He was always wanting to learn, and he had this desire to grow, get better, and was really brought unique ideas. And honestly, the most creative leader that I've worked with. He would always challenge us to think differently from a more creative aspect. There's a concept called counterintuitive thinking. He practiced that a lot. He really did things in a different way, and it really helped the organization. And he grew. I promoted him 3 times, and he was promoted 1 more time after that by somebody else. So there's that's a person that never was satisfied with where they were, how good they were. When I think about that, I think about this famous coach named Nick Saban. Nick Saban never was satisfied or never rested on laurels. He always was trying to get himself better, his team better, and it's kind of plays, Mark, into what you talked about just earlier about, because if you look at him, he might seem gruff, like his leadership, and stern, but if you his players, have you heard many players say anything bad about Nick Saban about how he treated them? And the answer is no. They respected him because, first of all, they knew that he was going to demand the best out of them and get the most out of them. But he was going to be fair, and he was going to be fair. He's going to be honest, and he was going to be innovative. So that plays a huge role. Those people are always working to get better.
Yes.
Yesterday is over. I won, but I have a new team. I have a new situation. The atmosphere, the marketplace, whatever is different. How do I win again? How do I grow people faster, better? How do I do this? And the great leaders do that and they think about it and they go outside of their own network to grow. They just don't stay within their four walls of the three or five people that they know to get better. They grow outside.
Yep. No, I think that's exactly right, and I think that you have opportunities and windows of opportunities that outline what the time frame is for that development.
Yeah.
Whereas, coaching, especially college coaching or football coaching, whatever, you have another game the next week. You have 5 days to improve in specific areas, right? So that becomes kind of a training, a focus area. The bigger picture are the stuff that we don't see in the spring practices, the summer practices. It's the same way in industry, right? You have short-term and long-term. I've spent a lot of time working with both, and you have too. Startup companies versus big organizations that have been there for 40 years, right? And what's unique about that, startup companies have it's great. People always say, I want to go to a startup, but their window is fairly short. You better turn stuff around. By the time they're starting to commercialize, you better turn it around fairly quickly, because otherwise things happen that aren't good for anybody in the organization. And you and I were blessed to work for one that really developed and did well, but some people haven't. I think the other thing that comes with that then is a leader strategically balancing what he needs to serve for the organization's success and what he needs to develop people. Because what happens is oftentimes, if it's the old Greek saying, if you want to guarantee failure, give 5 years of success. Because by the third or fourth year, we've always done it this way. We're doing pretty well. And, we can rattle off all kinds of examples of that. The most famous one that from the business world was almost 30 years ago now, when IBM refused to go to smaller laptops, desktop computers. They had these big mainframes. That's what they were known for. That's what they did. That's what they wanted to do. And they almost lost, the majority of that computer business. And at one time, that was the computer industry. And then little companies that popped up, suddenly Hewlett and Packard popped up in California, and Apple and some other of these companies popped up, focusing on there. And that leadership capped their growth for a long time until somebody stepped in and said, you know what, we need to go to the market because this is getting faster and faster. Even Apple's a great example of that. There was a time when they said, people don't want a computer on their phone. They just want to talk, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, the power in these things are right, are stronger than the original computers that sent rockets into space. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. So those examples of leadership happen at all levels as it comes through. And I think that's an important factor as we
so Mark, let me stay on the Apple thing. So you talk about somebody that raised their lid on leadership. That's Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs raised his. If you think about the arc of his career, when he started, when he got fired, he did this. And by the way, he even admitted that his leadership was lacking, but he grew. Yeah, he grew. Now, there's a lot of things about how we did things. We can talk about that. But as a leader, and he grew tremendously. Another person that we know of is Howard Schultz. He grew as a leader. He both these people left their organization and came back in leadership and were better the second and third time because of the things that they learned, the things that they observed. So there's people that are good that become better. There's people that are really good that become great. And obviously, if you think of both of these, if you think about Howard Schultz and how he started Starbucks and how he grew Starbucks, tremendous.
Yep.
Tremendous. And Steve Jobs is lauded as this great innovator, leader. And if you look at how we talked about challenging people and how he wanted to do, he had a system and he wanted to be great, and he demanded greatness, right? He demanded greatness. And I'm not saying that everybody should be Steve Jobs or Howard Schultz. What I'm saying is you can raise wherever you are, you can go and get learning, get training, talk to other people and be better. I'll tell you about Mark and I at our second organization. we probably didn't go in a week. We probably never went less than 3 days on the phone for an hour and a half each of those
Right.
days. We
Right.
spent a lot of time talking about different situations. We would role play with each other on how we were going to do things. That's how we got better, by working, by him, Mark pouring into me pouring into Mark, going on other places. And that's the thing that I want you guys to think about, who are listening to this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's an important factor. In fact, I can remember one very blunt conversation I had when I was asking for feedback, and our organization had changed a little bit, and I picked up a new area. And one of the things you said is you need to spend more time one-on-one with your people because they don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of get in the habits, assume people we've worked with, they know us, we get there. And that was a very important moment as I look to bring on a new team and get together with a new team and get to know them. And those factors come out as they go through. We've talked, I think, about the lid and the impact that a leader can have on their organization. But also we've talked about, I think, the opportunity people have had to change, right? To remove that lid, to make that lid go higher, and it takes the organization with them. And I think that's really an important factor. I guess the question I have, if I'm watching this podcast, where do I go? If I'm a frontline leader or a mid-manager, a mid-level manager, what did you tell your managers to do to go and strengthen themselves, RP? Because you had a big organization, real big organization.
Yeah. So the first thing is I told them to find Mark Dunnies, and I did. I did tell them to find 2 or 3 people that they could always lean on and talk to weekly. I wanted them to have a support system. Everybody, that's somebody that could check them, right? Right. We need that check. We need that person but the person to grow. And because we are now in a situation where it doesn't have to be the guy next door, we can go on Zoom, we can do all this other Slack or all this. I got my first Slack message this week, by the way. So it's important that you have at least 2 people, preferably 3, that you can speak to on a regular basis. And this is not when things are going bad or things are going great. It's things that just to talk every week on what's going on. How can I help you? I saw your numbers. I'm in trouble here. I'm going through, all these different things. You just need that support system, especially as leaders. A lot of times, Mark, you hear that it's lonely at the top, and I don't have any support. Part of that is because you're not trying. You're not bringing people in. You're trying to solve every problem by yourself, and that's not. You can't take the weight of the business on yourself. You have to help share. Everybody's got to be collectively involved in helping your organization. It's not only good for you as the leader, it's great for the people around you, your leaders, the reps. If in fact you involve all of them, you become stronger together, and those people stay with you.
Yeah.
They stay with you because they feel invested in the growth of the company, because they're being listened to, they're being cared for by you. So those are the things that I think I preach to everybody is don't. This is a big thing that you shouldn't take full ownership of. Now you're accountable. It's a different thing. You're accountable for it,
right?
But you shouldn't take the full weight of making all the decisions and then giving it out, because that's not going to get you anywhere. So hey, Mark, we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. So just what do you think about, so there's the common barriers to raising the lid and really, and what would you say about overcoming those barriers? So there's 3 of them, so for this fear of change, resistance to feedback, lack of vision, right? So why don't you pick one or group them together, and how do you mitigate that as strategies to overcome those barriers?
So the fear of change is something that's I'll let you address as that comes through, because I think it's something there, and that ironically, is whether you were successful or not. One or you don't, it's the comfort zone. But I think the resistance to feedback is very important. It's one I see when I'm working with, high level executive levels, CEOs, presidents of organizations, directors of operation. The resistance to feedback because there is an underlying fear. Everybody wants it. Everybody says I want it, right? But there's an underlying fear that if they get feedback and it gets back to their supervisor, their board of directors, whatever, they're going to view them as weak, and it's a weakness and it's not a development thing. So I think that you can take the resistance to feedback and turn it around by being proactive and going out and asking for that. Rutherford, I appreciate the fact that you complimented me on the presentation I made to the group last week, and thank you for that. Two things I could have done differently, though. What would you like to see? Maybe not different, but maybe even added. What could I do to make that more impactful for you? You knew what I was going to say. I still want to be impactful for you. Going and soliciting feedback as opposed to waiting for it is a huge factor. And then the feedback can come in all directions. Some people call it a 360 review, right? Some people actually use that as their formal review. Some people don't. But I ask people to create their own network and do their own 360 review. Ask colleagues, ask people above them. Maybe it's not your direct supervisor, but somebody in the head of a marketing department, for example, or of operations department. And ask a couple of trusted people on your team and share this with me, because I'll give you an example. Do a little role play of what you and I've done for years, right? So Rutherford, I just don't feel that Tom understood the message that we were trying to share at the POA meeting, and you obviously got it. What could I have done differently to share the focus of that message, right? It's things like that. Seek that feedback, control that feedback. A, makes it a little less scary, and B, it really, really, can change the way you approach things as you go through. Ask a lot of questions, even in the feedback range.
Sure. And let me go back to the thing. One of the things you said, the fear of change. So what I'll say, people have a comfort zone. Nobody grows in their comfort zone. Let me repeat that. Nobody grows in their comfort zone. You grow when you're a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you change and if you want to grow, you have to get a little bit uncomfortable, and you have to learn. And it's not a lot uncomfortable. It's just a little bit uncomfortable. So
right.
Changing is growing. If you don't change, you don't grow at all. Right.
Right.
You have a lot of things going on with this 2-letter word called AI now. There's a ton of it, right? If you don't know AI, and if you don't change with the whiz going, you will be left behind, miles behind. Yep. All the companies who are doing this right are learning how to grow. So you got to change. Everyone's had to change, adjust. We had to change during the pandemic. The people that adjusted, changed, evolved, tweaked their model were the companies that were successful during the pandemic. So there's a fear because it's uncomfortable, but that's how we grow. That's how we get better by doing that. So that's what I would say there.
Yeah, that's a great example. I do a lot of work for an organization called Field Factor Training. And as we went through the pandemic, and it's a training organization, they were faced with, how do I train people who can't leave their home? And how do I train them to have an impact on an office that I can't go see? And that had the owner of that not made the changes, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best media to come across with that, they probably wouldn't have made it through. But she came through with flying colors. They do a great job, and now it's like a free wheel because we're back in the world again. But that's a great example. Everybody is coming through COVID. I mean, it seems like a long time ago, but we're only a couple of years out. Organizations are just now trying to adopt. Do I have people come back into the office? Do I do 3 a week? All of those kind of changes that we were actually forced to make, right? Yeah. As a society and as an industry, people were forced to do that, and that really. Those who didn't fear the change but were bold enough to make the attempt, I think the ones that came through this a lot faster. So,
hey, Mark, this hour went by really fast. So thank you for all of the points that you made. Great points. I hope people listened and really understood what the message of this conversation. And obviously, we talked about a lot, and the challenge that we would have for you, that I would have, and Mark, if you have one, would be to embrace change, right? Seek new challenges to different situations and continuously learn. Just continue to learn. If you're like me, you are a podcast junkie and listen to 4 hours a day of multiple people in my ear, or books on tape. So I never get in my car without, it's automobile university, basically, right? I get in the automobile and I actually learn and grow, half an hour, 10 minutes, whatever. I'm always trying to grow. So think about that. Let me close with this statement from John Maxwell. The higher you want to climb, the more you need leadership. The greater the impact you want to make, the greater your influence needs to be, right? And so that's where we're trying. We're always trying to increase our influence. We're trying to raise our lid. What I want for the people that are listening is to go from wherever you are to 2 to 3 levels higher. If you're a 4, I want you to go to a 6, 7. If you're a 7, I want you to go to an 8 or a 9. Okay, and it's going to be hard going from a 7 to an 8 or 9, but it's worth it to your team. It's worth it to yourself. So that's what I would have. Mark, any last words before we sign off?
No, you're exactly right, and I'll tag that says your team will notice. When you change, your team will notice. Rutherford, thank you for the opportunity to spend the hour together. It was a lot of fun.
You got it, man. Take care. Have a great day. See you again.
Yep, you too.
Hit him straight. Take care.
Bye.